crafters, Lisa here from Fun Stuff Crafts. So glad you could join me today for another Inspiration Friday. So this is kind of a bonus post this Friday because I had one of my new followers, Miss Patricia, reach out to me after I had posted my blog on the Skull Cap Challenge that we did a couple weeks ago. So her daughter works for a hospital down in Nevada, and she wanted to make skull caps to donate to the hospital. So she went ahead and made a few, loved the pattern, but her daughter came back and said, "Hey Mom, is there any chance that you can make a reversible skull cap?" So I want to show you what I did is I took our original pattern that we used and I turned it into a reversible skull cap. So let me show you. I'll go ahead and put it on. It works really nice. And what I did, cover up my whole head here, is I went ahead and just changed the pattern a little bit, and I was able to make it a reversible skull cap. So the fun part about this is you can use two pieces of fabric. You can have one pattern showing one day and the other showing another day. So we are going to be using the original pattern that I made on the first blog post, and I'll make sure that I put a link down below to that pattern. And then I'm going to show you very quickly how we can alternate the pattern and make it work. So give me a second. I'm going to get my camera angle changed and we are going to get making this cute reversible skull cap. Okay, crafters, so let's get started on this reversible scrub cap. So we're going to be using the exact same pattern that we used with our original scrub cap. And so if you guys want to take a look at that video, I'm going to click it down below. And I go through detailed instructions on printing out and putting together the pattern. But basically what you end up with is when you print it out, you're going to have 4 pieces of the pattern, and you are going to tape 1A to 1B and 2A to 2B to create 2 pieces of the pattern. So instead of recreating a whole nother pattern, I just decided to make an attempt to make this reversible one with the same pattern. So the only thing that we're going to do different is we're not going to do anything different with the top, but with the body of the cap, what we're going to do is we are going to fold it under 1.5 inches. So if I take and I measure that, it is just about 1.5 inches. So I'm going to take that and just fold it under all the way along. That's the only change of the pattern that I am going to make. So you can use the same pattern for a reversible or for a single layer scrub cap. So the other thing that we're going to do different in this one is we are going to be using 2 types of fabric, or 2 styles of fabric, one for the front and one for the inside, so you actually can reverse it. So what I like to do is I like to cut out everything together so that we know we've got the exact same measurements as we're making something that's reversible. So we're going to start with the body first. And now keep in mind, the original pattern called for a piece of fabric that was about 16 by 45. So I went ahead and just grabbed from my stash here. So I know these pieces are a little bit bigger than that, but they're still going to work for me. So what I'm going to do is I've got this fabric already folded. You can see that I have got it folded, okay? And so I've got a fold right here. And this first part of the pattern calls for this to be placed on the fold. Now I can definitely cut this out by itself, but what I'd like to do is I would like to cut out both of my fabrics at the same time. So I'm going to take my other piece of fabric and I am going to fold it so that I can get a long fold. So now I've got both my pieces and I'm going to cut them out identical. Now the reason why I like to do this is because we're doing it reversible. We want to make sure everything measures up exact. Okay, makes it much easier when you're doing a reversible. Okay, so I'm placing this on the fold. Now If you guys are pinners, you most definitely can pin this in place. I'm actually just going to add a few clips at the end just to make sure it doesn't come unclipped. And I am going to go ahead and just cut the body of my cap out. Once I get down here, I can add another clip so I make sure that it stays. The other reason why I like to do this is you make sure your ties are exactly the same. It just works out really, really nice. So I'm going to go ahead and try not to cut into the pattern. Now this one, the other little difference with this pattern is with the original pattern, I put elastic in. This one we're making with no elastic. So there we go. We've got our first piece cut and we've got both pieces of fabric cut right there. So I'm just going to trim these off. That's a little bit of extra fabric that I don't need. And I'm going to grab my cap top. Now the cap top also needs to be placed on the fold, but it's a longer fold, okay? So I could easily just throw it right here, but I would waste a lot of fabric. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to take my fabric and I am going to open this one up. And I am going to fold it down enough so I know I've got enough to pick up my whole cap. More than enough there. Probably wasting a little bit of fabric I don't need to waste. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same thing here. Okay, so that way I know my caps are going to be identical. So I'm going to measure my fabric up again. Okay, and I'm going to add a couple clips so that I know that it's going to stay together. Okay, and we are going to cut out our cap piece. Okay, so now we're all done with our fabric. Fold that up and just fold it up nicer when I go to put it away, but we're just going to put that off to the side. So now what we've ended up with is we have got two caps, okay? We've got a pretty pink and white, and then we have got this rose print, okay? So I've got two caps, and I've also got two bands. Now the reason why we folded that band in place or up from the original is I don't need all that extra material when I'm making it a reversible. Okay, so I've now got our two bands. Okay, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to grab my pressing pad. I'm going to put away my Cricut pad. I'm going to bring out my pressing pad because what we're going to do is we are going to find the center of each one of the caps. Now, I tried this without finding the center, and it did not pin right for me. So I definitely recommend that you do this step. So I'm going to find the center by folding it in half, and I'm going to do the same thing with the body, okay? And I'm just going to go ahead and do that for each piece. That way I'll have the iron part all done. Then what we're going to do is we are going to attach the top to the bottom, the cap top to the body of it. Don't need to press all the way down, but what we're doing is, let's start with our pink one first, okay? So I've got the exact center now because I've got it pressed right here, and I've got the exact center of my body piece too, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put right sides together. Okay, very important that you make sure you've got your right sides together. And I am going to just start adding clips. Sorry for that. I keep them in a little tin can, a little loud there. And literally, I'm just going to clip all the way around. And I highly recommend that you take the time to do this clipping so that you make sure that you've got it all nice and even. So I'm just going to, and this is really close to the other pattern. The difference comes in when we don't have to do the elastic and when we attach the caps together. So you guys will see that here in a minute. Okay, so go ahead and clip the other side. Just going to clip around. And then you guys, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do the same thing with the rose print. And this is what, you know, you can do one at a time if you want, but just makes it a little bit faster. You know, a lot of people are making these, donating these to the hospitals. So if you're in a production line, it's always nice to be able to pick up those little quick tips. So one thing I want you guys to note is when I was putting these together, I did not pull into the end of that. And it's hard to see with this fabric, but the circle of the cap comes around, and I left this because I'm going to stitch that straight down. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pin this other one exactly the same way. So remember, we've got the center, and I've got my press there. You can definitely use a piece of chalk if you want to mark it, but I can see it with my pressing. I've got my right sides together, and I'm going to do the exact same thing with the other side. So I'm going to go ahead and pin this. I'm going to fast forward through this, you guys. You guys can watch me pin in supersonic speed. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it over to the sewing machine, and I am going to sew my two caps bodies together. Okay? Keep in mind, you always want to do a back stitch at the start of your sewing and a back stitch at the end. That just really ties off your threads. It's just kind of like rule one of sewing, making sure that your thread stays. So I'm going to go ahead and just finish clipping here. And then right before I go over the sewing machine, I just want to go over with you where I'm going to stitch. And I'm out of clips. I'm going to sneak a clip. Might be able to see this one a little bit better, but I want to make sure you guys realize that this comes around here and my stitch is going to come right to here, okay? Because we're going to finish this off when we're all done. But so I'm going to take my stitch and I am going to back stitch right here, and I'm going to do a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around, and I'm going to end right here. And I'm going to do a back stitch. I'm going to do the exact same thing with this one, okay? Starting here all the way around and back, okay? So I'll be back with you in just 1 minute. So I went ahead and I put my seam all the way around, and you can see that all the way around on both of these, okay? So one thing I always tell everybody to do is clip as you go. So we're going to clip our seams. Nothing worse than having a project all the way done and having all kinds of threads to clip. So go ahead and clip both of them. Now this next step I feel is a very important step because I want to press out my seams. Now what I like to do is I like to take the iron and I'm going to press my seams down. So they're going to be facing down. Now I have also found that if I iron this direction, it works much, much better. Okay, so I'm just going to take and I use my hand just to guide just to make sure that my seams are pointing down, okay? So you can see here, if I roll this over, I'm pressing my seam down, okay? You'll also see the way that I finished that edge off, how I told you that was going to come. There is enough room now that when it comes time, we can finish off that edge. So really important to catch that edge correctly at the bottom. So let's just go ahead and press this out. Now, I'm going to take the time to do a top stitch around this. This is a step that you definitely could skip, but I just find that it finishes off the cap, and it also gives it, the seam just has a nicer finish to it, because you think about how many times people wear these caps, they're going to get a lot of washing. So by doing that top stitch, you're really helping that, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and just press out my bottoms there. The last time you really get a chance to really give everything a good press, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing here. Again, I like to just press from the inside and push out, okay? So I'm just going to go all the way around. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the cap, both parts of the cap, over to the sewing machine again, and I am going to put a very thin top stitch all the way around. What I want to make sure I do is that I'm catching this layer underneath here, okay? So we're going to go ahead and do that, and then we're going to put these together, and we're just about there. So give me a second. Okay, so I'm back from the sewing machine, and you will see maybe I've got a really close top stitch there. Did all the way around, and I was able to catch that underneath seam. So again, the reason why I add this extra step is the amount of times these are going to be washed. I think it's really, really important to secure the seams. So again, I'm going to clip. And I also wanted you guys to see that my top stitching did not necessarily go all the way to the bottom, because I am going to be closing this under at the very end. Okay, so now what you want to do is finish your clipping. Make sure you get all your threads. And then what we're going to do is we are going to put the caps together. So what you want to do again is see if you can find that center spot. Okay, so if you kind of fold them and you've got these guys together here, you pull this tight here, you get that center spot. And you can see I still actually have the crease there from when I first measured it. I want to line these up. This is another place. Don't think you can just eyeball this one, because Lisa's tried it and it doesn't work to eyeball it. So again, I've got my crease there again too. Okay, so we're going to put right sides together. Okay, so I'm going to take my pink cap and I'm going to take my flower cap. I'm going to do my center pieces first. Okay, just like we did before. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to follow that around and I'm going to clip it. And as I was trying out this pattern and trying to figure out how I could make it to a reversible one, I learned a few lessons as to where to leave your openings, because remember, we've got to turn this all right side out when we're done. First time I did it, I left my openings and I had to pull the ties, and it was really, really hard. So I learned my lesson, and we are actually going to leave the tie spot open, and we're going to leave the bottom of that cap, and I'll show you what I mean by the bottom in just a second. So go ahead and get this all pinned, and then I'll show you exactly where we're going to stitch. Okay, we are going to, and I can put a pin here and it might help your clip. I'm going to take over to the sewing machine, and guess what? I'm going to start with the back stitch and I'm going to end with the back stitch. I'm going to take over the sewing machine and I'm going to start right here, and I'm going to go a 1/4 inch here, here, all the way around, come down here, 1/4, and stop right here. So when I get done, my opening is going to be right here. So I've got lots of room. We're going to flip it inside out, and then we're going to finish off those edges. So again, 1/4 inch seam all the way around, okay? So I'll be right back. Okay, so I'm back, and I've done my seam all the way around. I'm going to go ahead and clip my threads, and then we are going to make this, turn this right sides out, okay? So the only tricky part is, and it's not too tricky, is just getting those first corners done. And this is where I use that bone folder again. And I just really want to get my corners. Now, one thing I could have done that I didn't do on this one that I'll do on this one to show you is, normally I do clip my corners. Just helps make them a little bit more crisp. And so go ahead and we'll poke those out. I was using a knitting needle, and I poked through a few times, so I decided to get my bone folder out. Okay, so now all we're going to do is turn the rest of our cap right side. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to give it a good press. Really, really important that you're going to do a good press. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do a top stitch all the way around. And guess what? We have got a completed cap. I will show you how we're going to fold in these edges so we get a nice finish on the back. Now, I've had a few people comment that ties aren't long enough. Make the cut longer, make longer ties. You sure can do that. I know there are different size heads out there, and so I know it's not necessarily a one size fits all, but the one thing I have learned is as long as your ties will tie tight, you can do it. I've also seen people with posts on people with ponytails, different things to do. This is just my basic take on a cap. So I'm sure there's other ways out there to do it, but this is just my version. So what we're going to do now is remember how we didn't finish off these edges, and we are just going to fold them under. Okay. Try to get them even, and you should have a little bit the ability to be able to do that. Okay, I'm going to give it a press. Okay, and then the other thing you're going to do, you're going to do the same thing, and you're going to press in the ties. Okay, so just fold them, and they should already be started because we already had the tie at the one end. And sometimes what I like to do is just put it down and pull it tight. Okay, and when we get in and sew these on the sewing machine, we're literally going to top stitch. I gotta get a little bit more of a fold there. You're going to do a top stitch, and you're going to do a right angle turn right in this corner, and then go across here. Now, one thing I've seen people do just to give it a little bit more strength on the back, because you're going to be pulling on it as you do your ties, is to do a zigzag stitch across here. And when you think about it, nobody's really going to see that back there because that's where you're going to have your cap tied. So that is definitely something that you can do. So just a good press here, though, is really, really important to make sure that you've got everything lined up. Okay? So then what I like to do is just make sure, and if you're off just a little bit, which definitely can happen, you're just going to tuck in, and then you're going to sew. These ties are not going to be, that corner of the tie is really not going to be seen. So, I know we all like to have everything be perfect and everything look so pretty, but it doesn't have to be exact. It's homemade, you guys. So I do like to put a little pin there So now the very last step we're going to do, you guys, is we are going to make sure that we've got a good press all the way around, okay? And then I'm going to top stitch all the way around the entire cap. So I'm going to give it one last really nice press. And then we are going to take it over the sewing machine and I'm going to do a skinny top stitch to it. I'm going to make sure I catch in those ties. Really important when you're folding under the ties. If you don't have much material there, do the stitch or the seam as close to the edge as possible. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and do that, and I'll come back and I'll show you our finished product. Okay, I'm back and I have put a top stitch all the way around, and I did go ahead and decide to do the zigzag stitch right there, and so it might be kind of hard for you guys to see, but a zigzag stitch around there. So now we have got a cap that is a beautiful rose print on one side and a pink print on the other side. So there you have it, my take on a reversible scrub cap, and I will show you the finished product on in the next clip. And here's an example of our scrub cap. I'm so glad you joined me for another Inspiration Friday. And if you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And click on the bell and YouTube will alert you each time I upload a new video. And don't forget to check out my blog at funstuffcrafts.com with lots of other inspirational videos.